Hey everyone, welcome to Awareness with Ashley. My name is Ashley Stewart. I share a first-hand experience of what it's like living with idiopathic intracranial hypertension. You'll hear me call this IIH and migraines. I use my own experience to share what living with IIH and migraines is really like. All right, hello everyone, and welcome to this week's podcast. So, my name is Ashley Stewart, and this is Awareness with Ashley. This week, I'm talking about an emotion that is a very common emotion that we experience with migraines, or at least it's been common with me, and that is frustration. Frustration is a very common thing that I think we all experience at one point or another with this condition. I think when we talk about some of these emotions, we give permission to ourselves to really introspect and to go, yeah, actually, you know what? That might be something that's actually happening to me, and I didn't realize that was a thing. Giving permission to talk about it just maybe will get you to reflect on your own experience and go, yeah, you know what? I have been repressing frustration in that way. So I've kind of written down, or I guess typed out, because I always do make some notes for these podcast episodes just to keep myself on the topic, because I tend to go off and talk about things that are kind of on my mind if I don't have that. With this particular topic, I wrote some things out so that I wouldn't forget to mention some of these more subtle areas of frustration. Honestly, I'm probably not going to be covering everything that could possibly be the case what's causing frustration with me in this episode. I just wrote down the things that came to me. Some of these are going to be the more obvious things, but I'm hoping that I cover the more subtle things as well. I tend to repress frustration myself, so I'm hoping that by doing this, it's not only helping all of you, but it's a bit of a therapy session for me as well. Frustration comes in many forms with having chronic pain and chronic illness. From the frustration because of being in constant pain, to the frustration that comes with the feeling of being isolated, to even the frustration of grieving the life you had before. There's so many different types of things that I think can cause frustration, and there's some more obvious types of frustration, but there maybe many that you might not realize is actually a frustration until you dig deeper and really introspect into this particular emotion. Frustration is something that often comes up actually quite a bit in my meditation stuff, and this is something I've been actually working on. And by working on, I don't mean trying to dig into why the frustration is there, or even particularly why I might be feeling frustration in that moment, but just digging deep and really feeling into the fact that there is frustration there and not repressing any frustration that comes up. Now, I may figure out later that the reason I actually have frustration is because of something to do with my migraines. That has happened many times over the past few months, and it may not be directly that something migraines has caused me, but it might be something to do with maybe there's an indirect relationship with the migraines. Frustration can also be something that's quite sneaky, and I don't think I'm alone in the fact that, again, it's tend to be something that I do suppress. I'm a very emotional person, and I'm thankful that I feel like I'm able to be open about my emotions, and all of that, but there are emotions that I do tend to repress. And one of the things I didn't realize until embarking and exploring non-duality is how much I actually do tend to repress certain what we consider negative emotions. I'm not convinced anymore that there's a certain thing of negative emotions, but what society considers to be negative emotions is something that I feel like are things that I've been conditioned to repress. Frustration would definitely be one of them. I think frustration is a big one too, just because of the types of jobs that I've had. There's a lot of times where you can be frustrated in the environment that I work in, and you're forced to repress those emotions. As I was saying, frustration can be quite sneaky, so it's something that you may not be realizing that you're actually suppressing until it's too late. There's a lot of emotions that we maybe have been conditioned to repress, and getting them out is very, very important to this overall thing. A particularly big frustration a lot of us have is with the lack of understanding, or the feeling of a lack of understanding from those around us about what we're experiencing and what we're going through. Chronic pain is misunderstood, and migraines are definitely misunderstood. There's a lot of chronic illness that is misunderstood, and how much you have to manage in your life to be able to, whether it's be able to function, whether it's be able to do all of the things that you do, but that the people around you aren't going to see directly everything that you do. And even with the best support from those around us, we feel isolated with having illnesses like this, because it's a hard thing finding people who really get it. This is why I think support groups can be a benefit, but there's a lot of drawbacks to support groups as well. One of the biggest things I find on online support communities is, although there's often a rule to not give medical advice is given in a subtle way. And this is something that you may not realize that you're actually doing until it's too late. It can cause very major harm. They can only go so far as well. So like in a support community, if you're not actually meeting with people in real life who have the same condition as you, it's really only an online thing. Like, to build a true community and true support system, I really do think that in-person relationships are extremely important. Like, social media can provide a certain amount of support, which is partly why I have the channel, but it can only go so far. I think it's easy for those of us to find friends who have migraines, but finding people who have IIH, finding people who deal with chronic pain might actually be a little bit easier. Chronic pain is such a broad category. Finding people who have chronic migraine is really difficult. So like, people can kind of understand who have migraines, and even episodic migraines to a certain degree. What they won't be able to relate to is that chronic migraine situation where you don't get the breaks like what they do, and it's a very different type of animal compared to the episodic migraine. You're trying to explain to people like what you're going through, and you can't really put it into words. It's kind of like how in non-duality we talk about what is the present moment, basically, and describing what it's like to be dealing with some of these chronic illnesses is like trying to describe what the true present moment is like. As soon as you put words to it, it's a thought and it's gone. Like, it's just not possible. I've actually talked extensively about this isolation in my videos. I strongly suggest you go back and look at some of these videos. I think a lot of people find them extremely helpful and extremely validating. But like I've said, I've talked about this particular topic of isolation extensively because it's something that I've struggled with personally myself. And although I have a fantastic support system in my family that is closest to me, I still have felt that isolated feeling. It's not anybody's fault. Like, people need to realize that just because you're feeling isolated, it's not their fault for or lack of showing up. In fact, it may not even be close to that. It's the fact that that person never truly will understand what it's like to experience what you've been through or what you're going through right now when you're having a bad day, or, you know, when those feelings of frustration come up of, I just can't do this anymore, or I just want to be cured. I mean, I think we all go through that. I'm going to get into that in a little bit. An area of obvious frustration that might arise, in particular, is with family that denies or dismisses our symptoms or what we've been through. But maybe some not so obvious frustration might arise with the feeling that those closest to us are just not really getting it. Frustration with the, I think, unsolicited medical advice from either family, friends, or people who are truly meaning well, but don't realize that they're causing harm. And, I think it's when it comes to this topic and being on the opposite side of it, like with trying to support someone who's going through a really, really rough time, it's going to be very individual in the way that you're gonna be able to respond to that. And I try and tell people, like, there may be some people who are more than willing to listen to advice, but if we're at a period of frustration and we're trying to vent out our feelings, I think we've kind of been through that and are just looking for a listening ear. One of the things I think has been the most humbling about sharing my own particular journey with all of this is that a lot of people are just looking for their particular story and experience to be heard. I just want to say that if you ever want to leave your story in the comments or even email me it, like, I love to hear people's stories, and I may not respond because I don't know whether some people are honestly wanting advice or whether they just want someone to hear and understand them. I do think that there's some frustration with a feeling of not being heard or not being understood. Trying to have someone in your life who can be there in that way. If you can find that, it's almost like finding a golden bar or like a bar of gold or something like that. Like, that's a very rare thing. It doesn't often happen where you can find someone in your life that is willing to listen rather than listen to respond, kind of thing. So if you can be that person in someone's life who has chronic illness and is just willing to listen to them when they're feeling the absolute worst and the most frustrated, the most emotional, you could probably be that best friend for someone. I wonder if that's kind of what my camera has been this entire time. So, like, I film my videos for people so that, hopefully it reaches someone and it, provides them benefit of some kind. But there's a lot of things that honestly don't make it onto the channel. That is me honestly venting to something that cannot talk back, which is my camera. And it's been the most therapeutic thing for me. And I honestly think that my YouTube channel has given me that benefit alone in that particular way sometimes more than in any other way. Like, I'm thankful to have a platform to share my story, but I'm almost equally as thankful for having a camera that I can just vent out my frustrations when things get really hard. Now, things are a lot easier than they used to be, but there's still times where I still get very, very frustrated. I think a second biggest area of frustration is missing the life we had before we got sick. This has probably been the absolute toughest part for me. I miss so much even now about my life before, if I'm being honest about it. Like, there's still a lot that I miss despite the fact that I'm living pretty much up to what I kind of thought my ideal life would be after being diagnosed in 2018. In one way, it's like kind of surprising that I still go through bouts of grief and frustration, but it honestly happens more than what people would think. Even with being so happy in the present moment, these thoughts come up still quite a bit. I think these frustrations can become more of a big deal, like when you're dealing with certain particular things in your life. So whether you're having a really, really bad day, really, really dealing with a nasty migraine. For me lately, it's been kind of the frustration of the fact that I have to rely on insurance and have felt a bit stuck, I guess, with that particular part and feeling like I can't upgrade my education or and all of that, even with being as happy as I am in the present moment, I wish I didn't have to rely on my Aimovig needle to function. I would love to have a break from it. I don't like having to give myself a needle monthly to be able to function. I wish I didn't have the experience of being a human barometer every time a snowstorm comes through or we have a low pressure system coming through. I wish I didn't have to experience the symptoms that come along with that. I wish that I didn't get as sick when I had my period. Like, I think a lot of other women or those of you who have periods will feel this when I say periods are enough pain on their own. Adding in migraines that are extremely predictable on top of that, along with the cramps and the bloating and all of that comes along with your period, I wish I could get a break from it. Like, if I didn't have to deal with that, I would probably be feeling good a lot of the time. If I didn't have to deal with the weather changes, I'd probably be feeling good a lot of the time. If I didn't have to, I wish I didn't have to rely on my needle all of the time. Like, those are areas of definite frustration. That being said, as much as I get frustrated and have these thoughts come up all of the time, even now, even with a lot of meditation practice, a lot of working on this particular area of my meditation practice and of my personal, thoughts and all of that, I honestly feel like having this frustration is completely normal, and that going through frustration is a little bit of a necessary thing. Like, I think if you weren't really feeling some of these emotions, that things just wouldn't be normal. I don't know. Then again, I don't really know what normal means anymore, but I just feel like it's a normal thing to experience when you've had your life change so drastically and in such a permanent way, because there's no cure. Like, you just adapt to the things that you're adapting to. I would be lying if I said there weren't many times where I just want to throw my arms up and yell out loud, "Oh my goodness, I can't take this anymore." Now, this doesn't happen a lot, but I will feel sometimes deep frustration with this when everything's kind of piling all at once and I've been repressing the frustration. This doesn't happen at all hardly anymore, because the frustration that I often do feel when it comes to like anything in life comes out a lot on the meditation cushion. Sometimes I cry these days because I'm happy. I sometimes cry because I'm frustrated. I cry because I'm sad. There's like, it's almost like you're going through like mood swings that you can get during your period, for those of you who deal with those kind of things. A lot of emotions come out on the meditation cushion. So like, there's a lot of neutrality off of the meditation cushion. But like, when I was repressing those emotions before, there was a lot of holding back, and it would just come to a head and explode like a volcano at some point. And the worst part, and would often be when this volcano exploded onto people that had nothing to do with the reason why I was feeling frustrated. And for me, because I wasn't working at the time, that would be like my family and the people that I'm closest to, which is really, really unfortunate. And like I said, I'd be lying if I said it never did get to this point during my worst days. But thankfully, this frustration now gets to come up and be seen, be heard in my meditation sessions. And there are actually times where I find myself a little bit more emotional, a little bit more dealing with the emotions. And these emotions will come up and need to be brought up more. So like, I tend to only do like one meditation session a day right now, because that's what I feel like is best. When I'm going through a whole whack of emotions, like what it's been like over the past few weeks, I've actually been going through a really, really emotional period with my meditation. It's 100% normal. I tell this to people so that they don't freak out. Like, it's not all peace and bliss with meditation at all. There are some really, really tough emotional periods. And that, with that being said, the frustration gets to come up during that time. It's frustration from everything that's going on. Like, it's not just my migraines or all of that, but certain things can definitely be triggers depending on what's going on. I think I've talked about frustration actually in the past before, but I definitely have not talked about it in this particular way because frustration is something that I've been personally exploring and really doing a lot of work on with my meditation lately, because it's an important thing that I feel like I just have to talk about right at this point in time, and it's something that's kind of right in the moment. All right, guys, so I think that's everything for this particular episode that I want to cover. I don't think I want to talk about anything else. So if you're wanting to, you can follow me across social media on Instagram and TikTok at Awareness with Ashley. This is where you'll find the shorter video content. And I'm hoping to eventually increase the amount that I'm sharing on both of these platforms now that we have the community tab on YouTube. But like I said, there's going to be times where there's not a lot of stuff coming from me just because I have to preserve my energy for everything else that I do in the day. If you're wanting to, you can follow me on Facebook at Ashley Stewart. This is the same as my YouTube channel for those of you who are watching on other platforms and want to find me on there. The YouTube channel is where we do weekly lives, which happen on Wednesdays at about 3:30 in the afternoons, my time. You can also find me on Twitter. I'm not on Twitter very much anymore, but you can find me occasionally sharing stuff on that platform at AshleyStewart94. If you're wanting to support me, you can do so on locals.com. That's ashleystewart.locals.com. If you're listening on the podcast, please don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It just helps us get seen. That's the same with the subscribe and like on YouTube. It just lets the algorithm know that you're enjoying the content and want to see more of it, as well as push it into people who may be interested in this topic and all of that wonderful stuff. So thanks for joining me for this week, and I hope to see you next week. Bye, everyone. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider subscribing and leaving a review on your favorite podcasting app. It really helps get the show out there. Hope to see you again next week for our next episode. Bye, everyone.